Welcome to Women Sweet on Women, Black Lesbian Film Festival, sponsored by ZAMI NOBLA, National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging, Out on Film, and Sisters in Cinema, in partnership with Beyond Bold and Brave, Black Lesbians United, AARP Georgia, and Third World News Reel. And my name is Mary Ann Adams, founder and executive director of ZAMI NOBLA. I'm honored to introduce this talkback for The Bible Tells Me So with Reverend Brenda Poteat, a lifelong North Carolina resident who is happily retired and committed to volunteering for various causes in her community. And Dr. Tonia Poteat, her daughter, who is assistant professor of social medicine at UNC Chapel Hill, as well as core faculty for UNC Center for Health Equity Research, and the moderator for this talkback, Reverend Angela Denise Davis, an ordained minister, ukulele teacher, and musician, and the creative director for ZAMI NOBLA. Tonia and Brenda, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this talkback to give the audience a better understanding of issues around this documentary. And Angela, thank you for being the moderator. I'm turning it over to you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mary Ann. It is really an honor to be here as well, because I can't begin to tell you how important I think Brenda and Tonia, your presence in the documentary for The Bible Tells Me So has been for so many people. Actually, before I even met you, I saw you in the documentary, and it was one way for me to kind of help pass on just the information in that film to others in my circle of family and friends. I want to start with where you were then, because it was very clear in the documentary, Brenda, that you saw same-sex relationships and orientation as an abomination. And that was the word you used, and you were clear about that. There's been some time that has passed since then. Where are you now as opposed to where you were back then?
I don't remember using the word abomination, but I may have. At the time, I thought that it was not a true feeling that she had. I thought it was because she had been hurt, and that was something easier for her to come to. I realized that the only thing I thought about when I thought about same-sex relationship was the way they had sex. That to me was foreign. But when I realized, as I was around her more and more and more and more around her friends, that they were, quote, normal people. They had the same feelings, the same thoughts, the same understanding and as anybody else did. When I was with her and her friends at a gathering or something like that, they didn't talk about sex. They didn't have sex. They talked like I talked with my heterosexual friends, just like everybody else. I mean, if I didn't know who they were, I wouldn't have known who they were. So I guess what I'm saying was that I thought there was a difference, that there was like a light on somebody's head. Excuse me. Now she's my daughter. I love her. I don't always agree with any choices that both of my children make. I say any because I've got a lot of children by different mothers and fathers. But I don't think about it. I love her. I believe that there's a reason for everything. I know that God does not make mistakes, and I know things don't happen by coincidence. So I'm happy, I'm satisfied. And I was able for the first time, and I think I shared this with Mary Ann, when I would introduce Tonia and her wife, I would say my daughter and my daughter-in-law. And back deep down, I realized that people would probably think that's your daughter and your son's wife. And for the first time this week, I recognized Nikki as my daughter's wife. And when it came out of my mouth, I realized, oh boy, this is another step that I've taken.
Yes, it's just so poignant in the documentary to hear how you express where you were and to know where you are now. I was also fascinated by the reflection you made, and you spoke to it there a few minutes ago about seeing the interview on Phil Donahue. And
Oh, yes.
yes, that whole thing about that so often when we look at LGBT people, we think about sexual activity as opposed to who they are as
Mm-hmm.
human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to make that leap. And
Mm-hmm.
you talk about it now just in terms of seeing Tonia and her friends. How do you think that, particularly in the world of being a minister in a church, that people can come to that place of really understanding and appreciating people whose sexual orientation is very different from theirs? How can we help people process that as you've been able to do?
First of all, to be honest, totally honest, I think they have to want to. There have been for so many years, it has been a stigma. And I think people have to want to. I've heard the arguments, sex was made for procreation. It was made for enjoyment, but the main reason was procreation. And so if that's not happening, then you shouldn't be having sex. I don't think really that there's anything that can be done differently that hasn't already been done to change anyone's mind. I think they have to want to. I think that you have to want to see it. You have to come to a realization that I looked at my child and I thought about who my child was and how she was and what kind of person she was. And I would assume that she would select her friends based on the same qualities that she had. You don't step too far from where you are. As my mother used to say, the nut doesn't fall too far from the tree. So she wasn't going too far out of the way. And when I looked at that and realized who she was, then I had to really rethink myself and think, this is what I have to look at. I have to look at the person, not at her sexual orientation. And I think until someone gets to that point, there's nothing that anyone can do. I've seen people who may, quote, accept homosexuality, but can't accept transgender. They don't understand. They can't figure out why. So I don't think there's anything that the community can do to change a person's mind. I really don't. It's sort of like the Trumpsters.
Tonia, let's turn the lens on you. I'm curious to know, when's the last time you viewed the documentary, and how was it for you hearing your mother's story and talking about your relationship on film and just the process of you and her really coming to renew your relationship once you came out to her?
It's been a while since I'd seen the documentary, and I think my mother reminded me that I watched it again sometime in the last year. I think a friend of mine hadn't seen it, and so we watched it together. It feels like a really long time ago. I remember in the documentary talking about how one of the reasons I would not ever get married is because I wouldn't want to have to face the dilemma of inviting my parents and them choosing not to come because they didn't approve of my sexuality, or not inviting them and having them not there because I chose not to do that. I didn't want to have to face that. So it's very different now. Obviously, my parents were at my wedding. They took part in it. My father said the blessing over the meal. And they've embraced my wife with open arms. So it feels like a different planet.
Well, hearing your mom talk now, and I recently reviewed the documentary again, and looking at the footage from her then, it seems like there's been a huge world of growth, Brenda. And I'm wondering, how is it as a minister that you've been able to reconcile your religious beliefs around the ways in which you've embraced your daughter and your daughter-in-law?
My religious beliefs have not changed. All through the Bible, it talks about growth in each person, and growing to accept God, to grow in their faith, to grow in their beliefs. I believe, as I said earlier, I don't believe God makes a mistake. I believe there's a reason for everything that happens, period. And I just believe there's a reason for this. I reconcile with people who say to me, I was just sharing with Tonia a couple of weeks ago about my nail technician who couldn't understand how I could talk about my daughter's wife. And she would ask, she said, aren't you a preacher? Isn't your husband a preacher? And I said, yes, and the Bible teaches me that God loves everybody. There's nobody that he doesn't love for whatever I may perceive as a sin or you perceive as a sin. He loves us all. And that's how I'm reconciled with it. There's a reason for it. I accept it. I don't question it. There are mysteries, and we're told all through the Bible. There are mysteries, and there are things that we won't ever understand. And that's where I'm at.
I think it's interesting because when people view the documentary and they see the last footage of you in it, you're talking clearly about you're not being able to accept your daughter's, I think you may have even used the word lifestyle, but that, you could come to appreciate her and the friend she had, but you were clearly not at that point. So it's pretty amazing to see the growth and the progress that has happened since the time of the film.
And I think that's attributed to prayer and meditation. That I get to a certain point, that I'm at a point now that I love my child. And I love anyone that she loves. I have to love anyone that she loves. And that's where I am. I don't know how else to say it. It's just an acceptance of what is. And
I have some thoughts.
okay.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, Mom, but we were having, I don't even know what we were talking about. Maybe we were talking about this and sort of how things have evolved over the last, however many years. Mm-hmm. And you said something about always wanting to be someone who evolved. And I think that takes courage and intention to grow, and that many people are afraid to do that. And you are not. No,
I was at one time, but now, and I think that comes with loving yourself, that you want to grow. You want to see who you can be for you and not who society expects you to be. So, I've had some unfriendly fellowship, maybe with some co-ministers or co-church folk about accepting. I've had people say, well, she brings her friends to your house and you know that she's dating them or she's with them, or you went to her wedding. How can you do that? And if you know it's wrong, I said, I can't say I know that it's wrong because it is what it is. And there's a reason for it all. Mm-hmm.
So does that
mean? And I love my baby girl.
Yes, we could tell. We could tell that in the film, even though you struggled with her orientation. And I'm just curious, has there been a change in your theology around sexual orientation, or has it been your love for your daughter has come to the point where you've been able to accept her for who she is?
The last thing you said.
Okay.
The last thing, I accept my daughter for who she is. And I don't try to figure out the whys. For a long time, I thought, what did you do? Did something happen to her? Why did this happen? Why didn't you see it coming along? You're a smart woman. Why didn't you recognize it? And I think it goes back to what my husband said in the film, that how we as society thought. If you remember, he said he didn't want his
yes,
yeah, and his daughter. And I think that's where our mindset was. I mean, that's where mindset was many years ago. And some mindsets are still there. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's not a change in my theological beliefs. It's my love for my child that I have grown and evolved, as she said, with that. Mm-hmm. And if it makes her happy, it makes me happy. If they don't make her happy, don't make me happy.
Because this was such an important documentary and so many people have seen it, was the documentary your participation in the filming, and this question is for the both of you all, did that create a landmark in your relationship? Did it allow you to talk about things, your lives, in a different way than if you didn't have the opportunity of telling your story on film?
I think so. I have to give Dan Carslake credit, that the producer / director of the film. He asked good questions, I think, and asked questions that, when I watched the film, there were answers to questions that I might have had of my parents, but I was not going to ask them, because I don't ask questions I don't want to hear the answer to, right? And I wasn't sure I'd hear the answer I wanted to hear. And so opening up that door or that window to that conversation, I think, was an important step for our family. And then I think my parents, right after the film came out, there was this whole circuit of being invited to speak. And back when people could be in the same room together, being invited to speak at various panels and, really across different cities, and I think outside of the state. And I think that, I don't know if you'd agree, Mom, but I think just y'all met so many different kinds of people, and that also broadened your horizon of who gay people were, what other people's painful experiences with their family was like, and how much that hurt them. And you knew that you didn't want to do that to your children. I think that had a big effect on, I think the quality of our relationship in general, and definitely how open we were to having conversations around my sexuality.
Do you remember any of the questions you would have liked to have asked your parents, but you were afraid of the answers and you were glad that it came out on the film?
I mean, all of them.
So basically,
not going to go there.
So basically, you all were just kind of keeping the before the film, keeping the relationship kind of as calm as possible on the waters, and not going underneath to really deep dive into some of those more heartfelt conversations.
Yes.
Yes, we didn't talk about it. I remember telling Tonia at one point not to ever mention it, not to talk about it, not to tell anyone. Do you remember that, Tonia?
I do.
I regretted that. Yeah. I told her she was going to ruin her life to never tell anybody, just to keep it a secret.
I mean, I didn't listen, but you did tell me that.
No, you didn't.
How did you feel hearing that, Tonia?
I felt it told me more about what she thought about me than it did about, I think that she was saying it as an attempt to protect me and tell me if I'm wrong.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah, but I also took it as like, it was a mark of shame, and she was ashamed of me.
Oh, I'm sorry. But if I think about it and I'm honest, that may have had something to do with it, because of what the stigma and the feelings were. I won't say back then, I'll say now. Here I had this brilliant child that I expected great things from, because she showed me that she was going to be able to produce great things, and I wasn't wrong. And it was a protective mode, that I didn't want her to do anything to ruin her possibilities or her chances. But I guess if it's sort of like my daughter-in-law and my daughter's wife, there was something there that prevented me. That there was something there. I can't say it was. I don't think I've ever felt ashamed of you, Tonia. But there was something there. Being honest, there was. Sorry.
That's okay. I just remember when you told me that, thinking like, I can't tell Grandma. Grandma's lived like 80 years. I'm sure she's seen everything. This is not going to be a shock to Grandma.
Well, that kind of borders on the question, my next question, because there's a saying in our community, Mama always know. Mama always know. Did you have any inkling, Brenda, that Tonia was a lesbian?
No.
She says that, but I don't agree.
Why do you think so? I often said...
You sent me a letter when I was in college. Do you remember this letter?
What did I say?
It was a heartfelt letter. And in the letter, there was some line and this is, I come out to myself, but not to you. And you said you worried that I would turn to women for love because I had been hurt. You said this in the letter.
Yeah, and I did feel that. I felt that because you had been hurt, because you had been abused by your teacher that I didn't know at the time, I always felt that you turned towards feminine looking men. They were small, not muscular, but they were just little men. Marianne's laughing.
I've never heard this before.
I think we need to do a part two.
And Hervey was the first one that was a man looking boy, you know. And so I did wonder. I wonder if you would turn away because you had been hurt, and then to look at the little fellows that you dated. Your daddy always had a little nickname for him, Little Beady Eyed, and you remember who that was, and High Truck, and different ones. And I did, I guess deep down I did wonder, because you didn't date manly looking boys. I mean, they were always, I don't want to say wimpy, but they were little men.
Well, I always thought, well, if every woman who'd been hurt had relationships with other women, then the whole world would be lesbian.
This is true. This is true.
That's probably right.
You know, I think the powerful thing, and I think we've just exhibited here, when you tell your story, it leaves room for so many other stories and explanations to emerge. And I think that's, for me, one of the reasons why I so loved your presence in this documentary. You were the only African-American presence, and it's important for our community to hear our stories and know who we are as people of all different orientations in the world. Is there something that you wish had been added in the documentary, or is there something now, if we were filming this documentary on the two of you, that you would include?
Well, I will say that the filmmaker came to my wedding, and he did the wedding video, which was lovely of him. And he also did a brief interview with Nikki and myself. I think it was the morning of the wedding or the day before the wedding. And he also did an interview with my parents.
The morning of the wedding.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he had planned to use it, I think, for his the second film that he did around the same topic, but it didn't really end up fitting into sort of the direction that film took. But I think it would be informative to people to see, you know, where we are now compared to where we were then, and what that's meant for our relationship.
What about you, Brenda?
The film was for its time. I don't know if there would be any benefit from a follow-up film or not. I mean, you know, we were probably the only people who were not there, who were really were not accepting, hadn't gotten to the point that we are now. The others in the film seem to have been, you know, at a different point than we are. I still keep in touch with the Reitons. We correspond on Facebook all the time. Every now and again, the Waller, like a happy birthday once a year. The other two, the Gephardts and Robinson, I think his name was, Gene, I don't have any contact with. So,
well, you know,
I don't know if there would be any benefit from it or not.
Well, that's a very interesting point you bring up, because it has been remarked by so many people that it's much harder for African-American parents to embrace their LGBT children. Do you think that's true?
Yes.
On what you said, widespread?
Right. I do believe, because I believe it's what we've been taught for generations and generations and generations. I think that we see what we think is the sexual act more so than we see the person. I think some of that has changed because I think people are more in the Black community are more open to, and this may be really getting deep in the weeds, but more open to different kinds of ways of making love than they were maybe 40 or 50 years ago, or more than they admitted. So I think there's some change there in that type of acceptance, but I don't think in the Black community that we're there yet.
Tonia, what would you say?
Well, I have questions about what she thinks I do when I have sex, but then I don't actually want to know what she... So sorry, I was distracted by that conversation. I have heard people say that. I guess I feel that there's more nuance than that. And that I had friends in college who were white friends who came out to their families, and they were completely kicked out of the family. So they were like, not only not embraced, they were kicked out of the family.
Right. We met some of those.
Black families are likely to kick the person out. They might say, shut up, don't tell anybody, we don't want to hear about that, or don't bring your partner home. But I think it's less likely that they will say, get out of my house.
Yeah, and I think I won't disagree with that. But I think that, again, comes from who we are as Black folks. You sort of hold on to your family members no matter what, unless you're axe murderer, you're going to look out for them. And Mom.
And even then, you go visit your axe murderer cousin in prison. Like, people do that.
Unless he killed my mama, so then that may be a different thing. But I think we embrace each other. Because we know, as I've said to you and your brother, we're all that we have. So we know that family is all that we can depend on. Really, as Black folks, we can't depend on anybody else doing justice for us. So I think you're right in that instance. I think they may not kick you out of the house, but they may not let you come back with your partner, or they'll tell you how to act when you come, and you better not wear this, and you better not be twisting around, and you better not be. I remember your aunt saying that to her son. You can come over here if you want to, but you better not be doing all that twisting. You better wear men clothes.
And he's gay?
He's dead.
He was gay. So Tonia, mother and daughter relationships are so unique and special, particularly in our community. And I'm just curious, because you mentioned the idea of wanting to ask your mother questions in the past you were too afraid to know the answers to. Now, as you look at your relationship and just how it's grown over the years, are there questions now you would ask her, or questions you would want her to ask you about your life?
I don't think so. I feel like we have a really open relationship. I don't feel like there's anything that I would want to ask her that I'm afraid to ask, or that I haven't asked. I don't think she feels that way about me. I feel like she asks me anything she wants to know.
Yes, ma'am. I learned if I didn't want to know, I don't ask.
That's true. People learn that about me. If you ask me, I'll tell you. You might be like, I don't want to know that. Don't ask me.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like I feel like I have a really good relationship with both my parents. It probably is the best it's been. I don't know if you'd say the same, Mom.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's not only, I think it's your maturity too, as you become more mature and
less sensitive.
No, I don't want you to be less sensitive. I don't ever want you to lose that. What's the word I want to use? I think as we mature, we realize what's really important and what's not really important, what's just on the fringes and what's really, really important. As a friend of mine's mother told us young married women, next year this time you're mad at, next year this time you don't know what for. If you're not going to remember the year from now, it's not important. And I think we mature to that stage, and I think you have matured to that stage.
I think the relationship between you two and Black lesbians and their mothers is just so special. I almost want to say, Marianne and I, let's just step outside and have the two of them talk, because there's just so much, I think, that goes on between the type of growth and the evolution that you all have done that would bring about just some various points of conversation, and some of it has emerged today. And I hope that this conversation will allow you all to have an even greater conversation about your participation in the documentary and just your lives in general. It's just a beautiful thing to see where you've come to, Brenda, having seen the film, and just the very strong sentiments you have on the film, and hear you now talk about your daughter and your daughter-in-law. On the ZAMI NOBLA podcast, one of my last questions to my guest is always, is there something we've missed? Is there something we've left out? Is there something you want to say to the listening audience that will make a difference as they're thinking about this subject? And I'm asking you all that now.
I can't think of it. I mean, I could probably think of something if I could sit here, but no, I don't think of anything that I think you've covered everything. Tonia may feel differently.
I don't know. I was thinking, like, what would I have wanted to hear someone say? Actually, I did hear Dan say to me that there is always the possibility for growth and change, and that you don't have to give up on people. Stay in relation to them. If that's what you choose to do, knowing that there's opportunities for growth, if that's, as my mom said, first thing, if they want to.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end our conversation, because to me, I think what this documentary says, and just knowing the two of you, is that point exactly, that there is always an opportunity for someone to change her mind and for love to be that which causes us to grow in relationship more and more each day. So I thank you both for being a part of this conversation and just sharing your lives then and sharing them now, and letting us know what is possible when love is in the house. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you.